Luke chapter 17 and the story of the 10 lepers who are healed is a very familiar story. The 9 who do not come back and say thank you, the one that does. So I'm just going to tell you ahead of time this morning, I am not going to preach a sermon that separates those who say thank you from those who don't say thank you and tell you that 9 out of 10 of you are not thankful enough and you need to be more thankful and go home and pray about that. Because I grew up with that interpretation my whole life. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going between Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered a village, 10 lepers approached them. One of them was a Samaritan. On this particular Sunday after Thanksgiving, on this Christ the King Sunday, I just want to share with you a few things that I'm grateful for, that this story brings up for me. I'm grateful that life's struggles move us toward each other. You know how this works. Common pain forge common bonds. When life takes a terrible turn, we seek out others, or we tend to naturally find others who've been down the same road or who happen to be on the same road. Life's struggles have a way of moving us toward each other. And so I have a friend who is a hospital chaplain, and she has said to me on more than one occasion that there are a lot of unlikely friendships forged in hospital waiting rooms. Some of you are familiar with that. People who might have never met each other in the typical routines of their life. They may be of different races, economic backgrounds, in different neighborhoods, in different churches, even different faiths. But somehow they find themselves together in a hospital waiting room, and they end up eating together and talking together and hoping together and crying together. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee, and as he entered the village, 10 lepers approached him. 10 lepers approached him. This is the region between Galilee and Samaria. This is the border of Galilee and Samaria. This is the line that was drawn in the sand, and the Jews didn't go from Galilee into Samaria, and the Samaritans certainly didn't go from Samaria into Galilee, because the Samaritans were considered unclean, they were considered enemies of the Jews. But leprosy? Leprosy? This common struggle brought 10 people together, and one of them was a Samaritan. One of my daughters is a recovering addict and alcoholic, and I have her permission to share the story this morning. About a month ago, she was the featured speaker at the Southeast Regional Alcoholics Anonymous Convention. She sent me a copy of her CD from the evening, and I listened to her tell her story, and I smiled. I remember that week after she was released from rehab, our family had to travel to Washington, D.C. We flew together on a Sunday afternoon to Washington. We got together that evening, and she said, "Dad, you know, I told them I'd go to 30 meetings in 30 days. 30 meetings in 30 days. I got to go to an AA meeting every day while we're here." And so we got on the internet and we looked for the AA meetings that were in the D.C. area. We found the one that was the closest to the convention center where we were staying. We got the address and saw that it was 7 o'clock in the morning. I said, "Are you sure? Is there another meeting you'd like to go to?" She said, "No, the 7 o'clock meeting would make sure the family can do whatever they want to do during the day, and I'm not going to interfere or interrupt in any way. Let's just go to the 7 o'clock meeting." She said, "Why don't we put on our shorts and our tank tops and go to the meeting in a cab and then run back from the meeting because it's just the right distance?" I said, "That's a great idea." So we went down to the lobby of the hotel the next morning. We went outside. We hailed a cab. We gave the cab driver the address. He turned around and looked at us and he said, "Are you sure?" We said, "Yeah, we're sure." He said, "No, are you sure this is where you want to go?" We said, "Yes, we're sure we're going to go." He said, "I'll take you down there, but no cab is going to come back and pick you up." I said, "Well, that's okay. We're planning on running back to the hotel." He took us to the Calvary Women's Center, a 3-story building with broken windows and no air conditioning, one of the worst areas of any town I have ever visited in my life. We sat in the back seat of the cab, and when we pulled up, I looked at my daughter and I said, "Are you sure you want to go here? You want to find another place?" She said, "I got to go to a meeting. I've got to go to a meeting. Let's just go inside. I've got to go to a meeting." We went inside. There were 80 people jammed in a room. We were the only Caucasians. No one said a word to us. Not a word. When the meeting was over, we ran back to the hotel. And I mean ran back to the hotel. The next morning we got up and I said, let's look at the internet and find a place for a meeting. She said, no, I'm going to go back to the Calvary Women's Center. Let's just go back down there. We know where it is. We know what time it starts. I said, you sure? She said, I want to go back down there. So we got in the cab, told the cab driver where we was going. He looked around and said, are you sure? Yes, we're sure. We know. And you're not going to come and pick us up, and that's okay. We're going to run back. And when we got there that morning, everyone spoke to my daughter. One lady said to her, girl, you must be serious about staying sober if you come back down here again. And every morning they walked or ran with us back to the hotel. And on Friday morning, our last day there, they had a cake for my daughter. And each one of them stood and said different words of affirmation to her, but the one I will always remember is, whenever you're in Washington, we are your family. And as Jesus entered a village, 10 lepers approached them. One of them was a Samaritan. I am grateful that life's struggles move us toward one another. I'm grateful that life's struggles move us toward God. And so the Samaritans, keeping their distance, began to yell out to Jesus, Jesus, have mercy on us. Jesus, have mercy on us. Life's struggles tend to move us closer to God. This wandering mix of leprous Jews and one Samaritan cry out to Jesus together, have mercy on us. We're in a bad space. We're in a bad way right now. And this doesn't sound strange to us at all. We know that life struggles tend to move people and in fact tend to move us closer to God. Psalm 23 is a favorite psalm of almost everyone. Have you ever read closely enough and heard in that psalm that when things are going well for the psalmist, he talks about God? But when things start going bad, the psalmist talks to God? Have you ever noticed that? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. All third person, all talking about God. But when the life tables turn, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Second person, talking to God, not about God. We know the drill. When life is going well for us, we talk about God. When life starts going bad for us, we move toward God. It's no different for the lepers. They felt ostracized, they were ill, and they called out to Jesus because they wanted Jesus' help. I am grateful that our struggles move us toward God. But when I read this story, and when I get to that part where 9 go off and 1 comes back and is thankful, one of the things that I am most grateful for, and particularly grateful for in our church, First Baptist Greenville, I'm grateful that life's blessings have not moved us away from each other. I'll say that again. I am grateful that life's blessings have not moved us away from each other. Now, I am grateful that struggles of life bring us together. I'm grateful that the struggles of life bring us closer to God. But I am most grateful that our blessings do not move us away from each other. And so Jesus said to them, go now and show yourselves to the priest. And they went, and as they were going, they were made clean. And one of them, when he saw that he was clean, turned back praising God with a loud voice and bowed down at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And this was the Samaritan. Life's blessings have a way of moving us away from each other. You know, as long as they were lepers, all 10 of them, 9 Jews and 1 Samaritan, it was comfortable to be together. They were comfortable questioning life together. Why is this happening to me? What in the world does this mean? Where is God in all of this? But once they were cleansed, once they were blessed, do you realize they couldn't hang out together anymore? They didn't hang out together anymore. In fact, the Samaritan comes back to thank Jesus, and Jesus says, where are the other 9? Weren't there 10 of you that were healed? And the Samaritan could have said, listen, he could have said to Jesus, they're just obeying you. They're doing exactly what you told them to do. You told them to go and show themselves to the priest, and so they've all gone to show themselves to the priest. But the Samaritan came back because he couldn't obey Jesus. A Samaritan couldn't go to the temple. A Samaritan couldn't have any contact with the religious leaders. Their blessing separated them. Several years ago, I received some tickets to an Ani DeFranco concert. Some of you will know her, some of you won't. I asked Roxy to go with me. Roxy was my favorite barista at Starbucks, and I knew she was an Ani DeFranco fan. And so we traveled and we sat at the Variety Playhouse in Atlanta's Little Five Points district, and I looked around the room before the concert started. I was the only white, male, middle-aged, straight Baptist minister in the crowd. Just going to say that again. I was the only white, male, middle-aged, straight Baptist minister in the crowd. In fact, you could choose any two of those adjectives. I was still the only one in the crowd. White, middle-aged, male, straight, Baptist minister, choose any two. I was the only one there. And I turned around and I looked at Roxy and I said, Roxy, does the church have anything to say to this crowd? And that fast she turned and looked at me and she said, the church has plenty to say to us, you just won't let us in. Sometimes our blessings separate us. How we were created, where we were created, the benefits or the struggles of our context, we can allow these things to separate us, where our struggles would just bring us together. In 1985, The Breakfast Club, that wonderful movie, it's only wonderful because Molly Ringwald's in it, that wonderful movie hit the big screen in 1985. If you haven't seen the movie or you aren't familiar with it, a group of teenagers are all sentenced to detention hall one Saturday, and they self-describe themselves as an athlete, a basket case, a princess, a criminal, and a brain. And during the course of the day, in their time in detention, their suffering brought them together. And this criminal, princess, basket case, athlete, and brain all become friends. But toward the end of the day, the brain, the kind of the nerd of the group, says, I know this may sound weird, but I was just wondering, what's going to happen to us on Monday when we're all together again? I mean, I consider you guys my friends now. I'm not wrong, am I? Of course, the fear is, and the reality is, they will not be friends on Monday. On Monday, they will choose. They will choose to let their differences, the ways they've been blessed, the ways they've been created, they're going to choose to let their differences separate them. That's why I'm grateful for First Baptist. We don't just allow our struggles to bring us together, and we don't just allow our struggles to bring us closer to God, but we choose. We choose to let our blessings be shared as well. We are not a church that looks for flaws in each other or makes judgmental demands of each other or demeans our differences, but rather we gather Sunday after Sunday in grateful humility, knowing that we all enjoy and struggle with our humanity. We walk together on some hard paths and we journey with each other regardless of our differences. And so what is Thanksgiving? We've learned from experience, we've learned from years of bruises and bumps and hard knocks that Thanksgiving's not just over the river and through the woods to Grandma's house. No, Thanksgiving is over the desert and through the wilderness and navigating illness and death and struggle and relationships and loss and 100 other pains and joys. I'm thankful that we move toward each other. Thankful that we move toward God. I'm most thankful that we do it together.